Shabbat Shalom. I want to start by giving you a little opportunity to chat with your neighbor. And the question that I want you to answer is, how do you introduce yourselves, or how do you say hello to a stranger versus a close friend? Go ahead. How do you say hello to a stranger versus a close friend? I just wanted to get them to chat. All right, anyone want to give an answer? Yeah, Adina. Shh. One moment. I want to hear the answer. Go ahead, Adina. There's no introduction. Okay, anyone else from this side of the room? Yeah, Steve. With your name? So there's a formality in how you introduce yourself to a stranger, and there's a little bit of an informality in how you go up to a friend. But actually, in our Torah portion this week, this is flipped. So when Revelation plays out at Sinai, the Ten Commandments begin with a very formal word, Anochi. So imagine that the Israelites are standing at the bottom of Har Sinai. The whole world is maybe trembling, or there's shooting stars in the sky. However you might imagine that revelation happened. And the entire nation stood together to hear God speak the Ten Commandments. And God starts with, I am Adonai your God. And you might think, how do we say I in Hebrew? Ani, you might think that God would have said, Ani Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God, but instead the Ten Commandments start with Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Ani is a little bit like how you would introduce yourself to a friend, a familiar, typical, straightforward way. And Anochi feels this formal, distant, almost out of place for a moment that we're supposed to be really intimate with God. We have come out of slavery. We are getting the Ten Commandments. We are figuring out how to build our society, structure our religion. And so maybe you'd hope that God would say, Ani Hashem Elokecha, just like I would say, I am your friend. But instead we get Anochi. So at first glance, this might seem, you might be saying, Rabbi, this is what I expect, totally normal. God has a lot of divine authority. There's an all-powerful God preparing to give the commandments. This reinforces this idea between divinity and humanity. But I actually think it's a lot more nuanced, and so our tradition finds this introduction to be a lot more nuanced. So the Talmud offers an acronym of why God introduces God's self as Anochi. The Talmud says that Anochi can be read as a homonym for the phrase, Ana nafshi ktavit yahavit. I have inscribed and given over my soul. This interpretation transforms what could have been a moment of divine authority, what we might have expected, into something actually far more intimate, what might have come through with Ani. Instead of merely asserting power, God is offering the Israelites something profoundly personal, a piece of God's own essence, which we might do when we come up to a friend. Through the Talmud's interpretation of Anochi, as I've inscribed and given over my very soul, we discover that even as God creates the most divine and ultimate authority, God also chooses vulnerability. This seeming contradiction, that the most powerful being could choose to share their soul, transforms our understanding of what real strength might mean. Before I started rabbinical school, I spent some time at the Hadar Institute studying a Hasidic text by a master named Mei HaShiloach, who teaches also about this word choice of Anochi. Mei HaShiloach says that the extra letter in Anochi, which is achaf, is the Hebrew prefix we might know that means like or as. So God chose to say, Anochi Hashem Elohecha, because God presented the Israelites with just one representation of God's self, rather than the fullness of God. If God had stood on top of Mount Sinai and revealed God's full self, there would be nothing to continue to discover, meaning there might not be any Torah to study today. Because there was more to discover about God, there was more to reveal at Mount Sinai and today, we have this beautiful religion that's based on having an ongoing relationship to God through Torah learning. So God showing the Israelites an incomplete self and an incomplete Torah, it's a gift, a great gift that we benefit from today. God's introduction to the structures of Judaism deliberately invited the Israelites into a process, one of learning and growth and discovery. And we still benefit from that. In beginning the 10 Commandments with Anochi instead of Ani, God also admits limitations. God knows the Israelites' relationship to divinity will evolve over time, just like a person's relationship evolves over time. Just like when you first introduce yourself, it might be different than the 50th time. God knows that the Israelites will never fully know or fully understand, and this is true of us, never fully know God, just like we will never fully know each other, or maybe we will never even fully know ourselves. But relationships are meaningful because we have the opportunity to keep learning more and more about each other, more and more about God, and growing. These ancient understandings of Anochi, both as divine vulnerability and intentional incompleteness, they sometimes unfortunately speak to our experience as Jews today. Within our community and our safe spaces, we might feel fully comfortable introducing ourselves as exactly who we are. No need to add the metaphor of like or as. But sometimes we're forced into this place of partial revelation, of only needing to reveal certain parts of ourselves for fear that we might not fully be expected. This pain of partial revelation, it can sometimes manifest in our daily lives, whether it's seeing our sacred traditions, and by that I mean putting mustard on your pastrami sandwich instead of mayo, which was put on the Cat's Deli pastrami sandwich last week in the Super Bowl ad. Or the more memorable anti-Semitic commercial during the Super Bowl. We sometimes feel the need to shield the innermost parts of ourselves, and those moments, they continue to force ourselves into careful calculations about how much of ourselves to reveal and when. And this is where we have a hard time with partial revelation. We struggle with partial revelation. We don't know when we can fully reveal ourselves. The Mei HaShiloach continues to teach that our understanding of the Torah given at Mount Sinai, mirrors the natural cycle of day and night. Just as twilight is neither full day nor complete darkness, our moments of revelation, either self-revelation or divine revelation, exist in the twilight. What feels like complete understanding, complete sureness today, may reveal itself as just the beginning of deeper wisdom tomorrow. In the face of our modern challenges, we might find wisdom in returning to Mei HaShiloach's teaching. Just as he understood that cycles of light and darkness are not just normal, but holy. It's how we grow. Our understanding of Torah and God and revelation constantly evolve, and we too constantly evolve. In our discomfort, we have and will continue to glean new wisdom from each other and grow closer to our friends and our allies. So what emerges is a profound theological model. God, who could choose to command complete obedience, instead chooses partial revelation. Who could demand immediate intimacy, instead invites gradual closeness. Who could overwhelm with divine presence, instead creates space for relationship to develop. This is not a God diminished by limitations, but rather a God who demonstrates that true connection requires both closeness and space, both revelation and mystery. When we bring together these layers of understanding, from the Talmud's emphasis on divine vulnerability to the Mea Shiloach's insight about partial revelation, we discover a paradox in the word Anochi. On the one hand, Anochi is more formal and distant than Ani. It creates space and separation between us and God at the very moment where we might have thought God was closest to the Israelite people. But also through this distance, God achieves a deeper intimacy. It's as if God is saying, I've written and given over my soul, but I'll also maintain some of my own boundaries and space for growth. And because I'm both distant and close, maybe we can actually have a more profound connection rather than a casual one. This is the divine paradox that can guide us today. Sometimes we achieve our most authentic self-expression not through immediate, complete revelation, but through thoughtful and gradual sharing. Just as God used the formal Anochi to create space for an evolving relationship with the Jewish people, we too might find that our most meaningful connections come not from removing all boundaries, but from the sacred dance of revelation and concealment. We see this paradox play out in our relationships. The people we trust most are often those with whom we've gradually shared ourselves over time, not to those who we've completely revealed ourselves at once. Our closest friendships and partnerships are built on this delicate balance, knowing when to draw near and when to maintain space, understanding that boundaries and deep connection aren't opposites, but they're partners in creating lasting bonds. And I'm not suggesting that this paradox is easy or the need to make choices on when and how we reveal ourselves less painful or even fair. But perhaps we can frame our current challenging life moments through the frame of Anochi, seeing our careful choices about our expression not as compromise, but as wisdom. Authenticity isn't always about immediate, complete disclosure. Sometimes authenticity means honoring the wisdom of gradual revelation, of choosing the right moment, the right space, and the right relationship to express yourself. Like the cycle of day and night that the Mea Shiloach describes, we can move between moments of full radiance in our safe spaces and more measured expression in others, knowing that both are actually our authentic ways of being. Shabbat Shalom.